A lot of people resist the idea that they are God because they believe that they are releasing control. They believe that they're going to lose out. They believe they're going to lose something important to them if they actually go all in and believe this. Hi, I'm Amy, and welcome to my channel. Here we discuss spirituality and psychology and how to manifest your dream relationships. And in today's video, I'm going to discuss how to actually start believing, how to actually start to dismantle your belief system and your resistance to being God. In a couple of videos ago, I did touch on the idea of non-duality and what your true nature really is. And I explained how difficult it was to describe because there isn't actually any description for it. It's actually the absence of something. So what I would say would best describe it from my perspective and what I've actually experienced is that experiencing God is the absence of ego. So it's easier to describe what it isn't rather than what it is. And this is why a lot of the teachings out there conceptualize and intellectualize this school of thought, because it's very difficult to describe what it is, hence the term non-duality. It's not two. And so when we do this and when we start a practice of self-inquiry, and I explain the technique that I use to really start to get into this, and we start to see the absence of thought and the absence of ego, what can happen is that your mind will start resisting it. And certainly something that happened to me, I was incredibly resistant to it because my fear was that I was giving up control. I was giving up something important, or I was going to lose something if I wasn't identified with it. And if I lost the identity of being Amy, then I would lose out. And I feared that I was going to go through an identity crisis because I was afraid that I would lose my personality. I was afraid that I would lose everything that I was identified with that was important to me. Actually, going through this path will make you more of who you are. Another thing that people are frightened of is not having control. And this was a huge one for me as well. I felt like if I truly stepped into this, if I truly started to embody that I would have no control over my external circumstances. And I'd really built this identity on prior teachings that I was in control, that I was powerful, that I could have everything that I wanted, and everything I wanted was already done. And all of these things were still true. However, it felt like I was going to relinquish these things that I'd identified with. And in this video, I want to explain to you how there isn't really anything to be afraid of, that all of those things are still true. It's just true from a different perspective. It's not a sort of human perspective where I, Amy, believe these things about myself. I believe that these characteristics are me. It's more an experience and knowing what your true nature is that supports that. And that meant letting go of these ideas and characteristics. I tried my best to embody as a human, and that meant no control. And ego wants control. Ego wants to be able to control its circumstances. Ego craves that control. So it's almost like it uses it as the Lynch Pin to stop you from actually going into and investigating what your true nature is. But there isn't really anything to be afraid of, because really you're not going to lose anything. You're going to gain. Maybe if you've tried in meditation to experience your I amness and experience your true nature directly, maybe you have had these thoughts throw up to you. So maybe you have had thoughts like, if I do this, I'm not going to be safe. If I do this, I'm going to lose something. If I do this, then everything that I believed wasn't true. And I want you to really sit with those beliefs, because I can tell you that the other side of this isn't something to be afraid of. It is completely safe. It is safe as long as you're doing it in a very grounded way, as long as you're not getting involved in this resistance that's coming up. Experiencing the divine is going to be something that's actually quite pleasurable. It's actually quite peaceful. It actually brings you closer to who you are. It helps you have compassion for yourself. It helps you understand that actually you're more powerful than you ever believed that you were. You're actually more connected than you ever believed that you were. So what has all this got to do with manifestation? How is experiencing that got to do with manifestation? Because this is something I really struggled with. I couldn't, for the life of me, put the two together, which really made me resist this self-inquiry, because in my mind I thought, well, if I do that, then I'm not going to get what I want, and that's not what's happening here. And at times we do have to conceptualize this to actually satisfy ego, so that we're not resisting going into it. In order to satisfy ego and drop the resistance, what I want to do is help you understand how going into your God self, how experiencing your true nature directly is not going to stop what you want from happening. In fact, it's going to help you on your way to get what you want. And the more and more you start experiencing that, being that, you will automatically know that what you want is going to happen. But in that uncomfortable interim time, when you have all the fears pop up, it's really helpful to have these in your toolbox, so that you can actually calm down, and so that you can actually satisfy the ego, so that it's not pulling up lots of fears and resistance to actually doing it. So for the purpose of this video, I am going to conceptualize what being God is and what it means to actually be God. So the reason why doing this is not going to stop you manifesting what you want is because God is all that is. When you experience yourself as that, there is no possibility that what you want is not going to happen, because it is you. Your desire is you. There isn't any separation. It is literally that you are going into your expansive state and selecting what it is that you want. And as Neville Goddard said, creation is finished. It's already done. And you will have that knowing when you get into that expansive state. And that isn't from your human ego. It's actually the absence of ego. So when you can shift into that observer, into that expansiveness, into that oneness, then the idea of not having what you want doesn't exist there, because you are it. And you know that it's already done. You know that it has no choice but to happen. If it is that you are in real resistance to this, tell yourself that, okay, I'm going to experience this, but I can always go back. I can always go back to how I was. I can, it's not a permanent thing. I'm just going to try it and see how you get on with that, whilst reminding yourself that doing this does not mean that you won't have control, that doing this, you're not going to lose out. You're not going to not have what you want, because that is the linchpin that is stopping you from actually doing it. It's stopping you from experiencing that real expansive, powerful feeling that is already you. It is you, and that is the truth as to who you are. You've never been powerless. You've never been unworthy. You've always been this infinite, expansive self. It's just that you've forgotten this expansive self and identified instead with the stories and the beliefs and the traumas that you've picked up along life. It's actually who you are identified with that is not your true self. And now ego will try and conceptualize this and try and figure it out, and it can't, because its perspective is incredibly limited. So when you take that away and drop it, even if it's just for a few seconds, so you can experience the expansiveness and get interested in the expansiveness and focus more on the expansiveness rather than the limited perspective, you are automatically going to know that what you want is done. You are automatically going to know that it's on its way. You're not going to feel so triggered and afraid anymore, because you know who you are. You know that that isn't the truth. None of your beliefs are true. They're just beliefs that you've picked up. This expansive feeling, this blissful, peaceful feeling is your true nature. And all of these beliefs that you've been trying to ram into your mind about being loved, being abundant, being worthy, all of that is already there. You don't need to try and believe it, because that is who your true nature is. That is what your true nature is. And you need to continue to experience that to ultimately believe it. You're not going to believe it by acting powerful. You're going to believe it by continuing to go into it, by continuing to question who you are, by continuing to meditate on this feeling that's within you, that is always there, that cannot be broken. It cannot be taken away. It's permanent. Everything else is impermanent. Everything else comes and goes. But that feeling, that sense of I am, is always present, is always there. So continue to tap into that. Instead of identifying with these disempowering belief systems, these disempowering patterns, actually work on removing those and disidentifying with those, rather than trying to change your mind about everything and becoming exhausted. Continue to experience the peace, the silence, that sense of I exist, that sense of all that is. And notice how your relationship to thought, how your relationship to feeling shifts and changes. And it doesn't have this huge reaction like it did before, because you can actually not engage with it. You can actually see it for what it is, and see it as, these are just thoughts arising. This is just a feeling that's arising. I don't need to resist it, because it's not actually stopping anything. So I hope you found that video useful, and I will see you in the next video.